Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the TNT pre-show, Season 2, Episode 5, sponsored by HSBC Bank Canada. This is your opportunity to check your audio and check your video and settle in for the next 45 to 50 minutes of stimulating cultural discourse. COVID-19 is still upon us in BC, Canada, and the world. And I would all encourage everyone out there to stay in your bubble and be safe. So we're going to have another first for TNT. We have a commercial. Let's go full screen with me. And that first commercial, we're going to advertise our COVID-19 masks. So we have these beautiful masks by local artists. In addition to, we have our own custom Emily Carr mask, as well as some beautiful Northwest Coast formline designs. In addition, we have filters that go into these masks to make them extra safe. So go to audainartmuseum.com for all your mask shopping needs. Okay, so we're still in the pre-show. The museum is open to the public every Thursday to Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And here at the Audain Art Museum, we're taking every precaution to keep our visitors safe as well as our staff. So please respect the current BC health order that's in place till February 5th, which is this Friday. All right, everyone, we're going to go live. And we'll see me on a big full screen. There we are. Okay, welcome everybody to Tuesday Night Talks, sponsored by HSBC Bank Canada. And this is Season 2, Episode 5. The non-essential travel ban is still in place here in British Columbia. And I would ask everybody to respect provincial as well as national health orders. Tonight, I'm in the permanent collection by the flashlights glow, and we're here at the Audain Art Museum in Whistler on the shared territories of the Squamish and Lillooet Nations. And we have a real treat this evening. This piece behind me, oops, wrong way, by Dempsey Bob called Northern Eagle's Transformation Mask of 2011. Rendered in yellow cedar, and this came courtesy of the generosity of Michael Audain and Yoshi Karasawa. Also, this mask will be included in a major exhibition that opens here at the Audain Art Museum in November called Wolves, the Art of Dempsey Bob, and it's a co-production between this museum and the McMichael Canadian Collection in Kleinburg, Ontario. So we've hit a new TNT record with over 521 registered for tonight's broadcast. So thank you to all our viewers that make this endeavor increasingly energetic for everyone here at the museum. So now we're going to go live to Terrace, BC, to Dempsey Bob, and I think you're sitting in your living room. Good evening, Dempsey.
Good evening. How's everybody?
We're doing great.
Bob, Tahltan-Tlingit artist from Telegraph Creek, BC. And I'd like to recognize the Tsimshian territory of Kitsilas and Helam First Nations.
Great. Well, thank you, Dempsey. And perhaps we can just jump right into the discussion tonight, and we'll bring up the first slide. Can you discuss the story behind this oversized mask, please?
Yeah, I did that one I was at a big gathering called Emma, and it used to be called Emma Lake, but it was a gathering of artists. And I was there with Lionel Grant, and he made a big mask too, and so I I made this piece. They had some beautiful yellow cedar there. So I seen this piece and I made this piece, and I roughed it out in about a week, I guess. And then I finished it when I got home. But how I got the idea for the merging into the wall was I was in New Zealand at a workshop there, and they gave me a small piece of wood, and it was only like 6 inches deep and about 10 inches wide. And I got the idea. I put the center line on the corner of one of the corners, and I blended the piece right into the wall. Because what happened was I had a 3-foot scale that I had to do it in 3 feet. And the wood was too small to make it proportional. So what happened was I just twisted it. And that's how I started doing these pieces, these wall sculptures. And I just wanted it to sort of flow into the wall. And it's really tricky because what happens, you're working with two planes like that. The side of the face is on one plane, and the one that merges into the wall is another plane. And it's actually just two corners. And then what I did was I rounded the back to get the back in 3-dimensional. And when you think of it technically, it shouldn't work because you're only working with two planes. But I figured out a way to make it work. And I came up with these ideas. And this part of the story of this one is the eagles that came from the north, came from our country. The eagles came down a long, long time ago. And the wolves too came from the north. And that's how I got the idea for the eagles on this piece.
That's excellent, Dempsey. And that torquing of the form, as Sarah Milroy describes it, the curator, and Michael, has really become part of your signature, and that you're able to, capture that moment, that supernatural moment of the transformation from human to animal form. Can you talk about how you render the eye in this work as well, please?
Like I had a dream about these eyes, and I seen these eyes and they were looking at me when I woke up. I don't know if I woke up, but I remember they were just looking at me. And ever since then, I've been trying to carve them because they were so alive and they had so much power and life in them. And then I realize now, like when you look at this eagle's eye, it could be human. But what I learned over the years is that each face, each form, each piece has its own eye, and you got to find that eye. And once you find that eye, it's like it's looking at you. And it's tricky, but I keep drawing and drawing and working and working and looking till I get it. And sometimes I'll get it right away, but sometimes I have to work at it. And then I believe that each piece has its own eye and its own forms and its own shapes. And to give it that depth in the right places, that takes a lot of practice and a lot of looking. What I realized about art is that you only see what you know. If you don't know it, you don't see it. And that's what artists, why we draw. Drawing trains you to see and to feel and to be able to sculpt it. You've got to be able to draw it, because what we find now is the best drawers are the best sculptors and the best painters.
And I know that you've been carving for over 40 years. And we're going to take you back in time a little bit, Dempsey, to 1974, to one of your earlier works called Old Woman Mask. Can you speak to the origins of this piece?
Well, I was going to school and I went to the Kasan School, Gittimack School of Northwest Coast Art in 1972, and then I had to drop out because when I phoned home, my wife said, we're starving, you got to come home. So I had to drop out of school. And I went back to work and I carved with Frida for a couple of years. And then I went back in 74. And that's when I did this piece. Like, we had a project, like we had to make a portrait mask, that standard 9-inch portrait mask. And if we finished that in a week, in the second week, we could make our own mask, whatever kind of mask we want. So I did this old woman mask. And I thought about, like Grandma Eva, my great aunt, and I thought about her when I did these. And then what I did was I put the copper on her eyebrows, copper on her nostril. And I used moose horn for her teeth to make them look old. And there's abalone shell. And the copper is the symbol of wealth to our people. And the abalone shell is for protection. It's also a symbol of wealth too. And then I found this old wig. And that's what I used on the gray hair. And this is the only mask I ever really kept. I gave it to my daughter.
And it's a beautiful piece that speaks to the origin of your practice. And we want to thank Dale Tozer for that photograph. Next, we'll move ahead in time to 1982 to this eagle daughter mask. And as you said, this is a formative piece in your early work.
Yeah, this piece was sort of right around the early 80s. And it was a time when my pieces started to change, like it got deeper and I changed, the eyes started to change and I started to see it different. And I started sculpting out like figures on the mask and using this blue. And people always said, why do you use that blue? And I don't know, I just liked it. And then I realized like in the future, that blue is going to be really dark. Because if you start with a dark blue, it's going to be black in the future. So I thought I like this blue. I like that color. So that's what I used.
And next, we have actually more sculptural works than masks. We have a frog and a bear, and they go together, and these come courtesy of Harold Demetzer, and maybe you can speak to these two fellows.
Yeah, it's Harold Demetzer. I did the little frog guy. I called him the little frog guy. And I used to pack him around, and I split that wood right in half. And then I did a little frog guy first, and then I got another idea for the bear, the little grizzly bear with the salmon. And so I carved him. Anyways, I put that little frog guy in the show in Vancouver, and this lady there, she says to me, she said, well, that little frog guy's not Northwest Coast. And I said, why? And she said, because it's not a totem pole. And I said, well, it's not a totem pole, but that little frog guy, I said, he's Northwest Coast because I did him. And then I thought, it was funny because, somebody asked me where my little frog guy was. And I told him, and he said, he made it in a show called Land, Spirit, and Power at the National Gallery. And that's where this little guy made it to. And I don't know where the other piece went now. It's gone in somebody's collection. But it was a really nice little bear. And he was really happy too. But I used to pack them with children, and I called them, they were like brothers. I called them. But that little frog guy, he was one of my one of my really first that I started to really change, like from doing totem poles just into pure sculpture, because that's what our people did. They were sculptors. They did pure. They did some of the greatest sculptors in the world, I think.
Excellent. And now we'll move to a real signature piece and one that's very important called The Smart One of 1989. And this photograph comes courtesy of Dale Tozer.
This piece I got the idea and I drew it down really fast. And what happened was I was going to do the show and I kept I saw this guy. And so I just went outside and I just roughed him out really fast. And then when I was working on him, I was working in the basement and I had a small window above the workshop. And the light was coming in. And I went up to get my coffee and I come back down. And before I turned the light on, I looked at that smart one across. He was on the bench. And the light was hitting him from the top. And he was looking at me really strong. And I thought, holy shit, he's there. You know, so I just left him. I didn't change him. I studied him. I kept looking at him and I let him finish himself. And then when I finished him, I thought about it and I thought, holy smokes, he was smarter than me, you know, because he ended up exactly the way he wanted to be or the way he was supposed to be. And then I realized but that's the way he's supposed to be. And that's the way art's supposed to be. And he ended up being better than I ever thought. And then I think I'll be remembered by this guy. And then now when I look at him, he's his own self. He's got his own feelings. And I realized now it was just great to be a part of him or his dad for a little while.
He definitely has a life of his own. That's most definitely. And so in addition,
one more thing, like this smart one was the keeper of the stories. And he was trained by the elders. He lived with the elders and he could tell the history word for word. And if he couldn't do it, he couldn't be the smart one. And like if there was a dispute between the clans or the families, once he spoke in the feast, it was the law because he knew. And that's why they call him the smart one. And my grandfather told me that about this guy. And I thought about it one day. I thought, who's going to know there was this guy called the smart one? So that's how this guy came out. And that's why I did him.
Well, thank you. That's a wonderful explanation of this piece. So in addition to carving Dempsey, you've done some graphic work, and we're going to bring up a print here from 1983. And can you talk about this wolf?
I seen this one. I was leaving Telegraph. I was teaching up there. That's my home village, and teaching the children drawing and painting, and we were making blankets. And anyways, when I was leaving, the sun was going down, and it was really beautiful, our land and over the mountains, and I seen this wolf on that sun, and so that's where I got this idea. And I drew them all out. And then when I went back home, I gave it to the elders. I gave to our people, the wolf people, I gave them this print.
Excellent. Now, I know, Dempsey, that you have sketchbook after sketchbook after sketchbook where you know, as you said, you have to be good at drawing to be able to be a good carver. In addition to the drawings in your sketchbooks, you have a lot of inspirational notes. And we're just going to bring up a couple of pages from a sketchbook you were kind enough to lend me.
Yeah, I draw all the time, not all the time, but when I get into it, I could draw all day sometimes. But what happens, like when I get an idea, I'll sketch it out and really fast. And try to get some movement in it. And then what I do is I'll think about it and I'll sort of develop my ideas. And then words come to me too, like, you know, things I've learned, things I've seen, like teaching. And, you know, like one time I realized, you know, how important your sight is and seeing, really seeing. And I think artists, they train themselves to see by drawing, drawing, and drawing. And myself, that's what I try to do. And then I believe that even a small idea, you could always develop it, or you could use it somehow in some other way. And so I always keep these drawings and I look at them and I'll get ideas from them too. But words come to me too, like you know, like one time when I was leaving my village, you know, these words came to me like a poem, and it said, the voices of our ancestors are thundering over the trees, trying to make us see. And, you know, like I realized that, you know, like in the art, you can't just know art. You have to know about life too. And you got to know, because art is life, you know. And because what happens is, like, if you have to express it, if you don't know it, how are you going to express it? And if you can't see it, it's like you're blind. So that's why I really stress the drawing and learning. Because when you stop learning, you stop being an artist. And that's what I know.
Excellent.
For sure.
That's excellent advice. And the next image we have is a beautiful piece called, it's a chief's wolf hat of 1995, and this image comes courtesy of Rachel Topham Photography. Can you talk to this work, please, Dempsey?
Yeah, these hats were like chief's hats, and this one is a wolf chief's hat. And I made the teeth out of a perculum shell. And what I did was I hollowed that head too. And I went in through the nostril to get that nose out, and I went in the mouth, under the mouth, to get as much weight off of it. Because you know, like my teacher said, you know, like if you're making a hat, it's got to feel like a hat. And he said, if you're making a bowl, it's got to be delicate and it's got to feel like a bowl. And he said, you can't make it feel like a barge, he said. And that's what our bowls felt like a barge, you know. So the red cedar, I thinned it wherever I can. But our people did it too, because it's also not only for the weight, it was for keeping it from cracking. So this red cedar is one of our main carving woods. And we use it for certain things. And it's a really beautiful wood.
And this work, as well as some prints, drawings, and masks, as I said earlier, are all going to be part of a major exhibition here in November called Wolves, the Art of Dempsey Bob. And as I said, we're doing this as a co-production with the McMichael in Kleinburg. Next, we move to a bentwood box, also in the same private collection in West Vancouver. And can you just talk about how you spread the imagery around this rectilinear shape, please?
Okay, the image on the right is, you can see the beak is right on the corner of the box. I put the center line on the corner, and you can see the eagle's beak, and there's a little human on the bottom. And then the eagle's eyes, and then you can see his hands, his claws are coming around the side of the little guy's face. And I did this one different by using the blue as fillers, because it's usually just black and red, but I used the blue to accent it and give it a different look. And then on the back part is his wing comes up the top of the back there, and then there's humans. There's a human face on the bottom with a beak. That's an eagle, little eagle, young eagle's beak. I've done a lot of boxes, and I've done a lot of flat designs, two-dimensional designs too. But like I learned like how to do these, like teaching in Alaska, because one time Frida, she sent us up there to teach because I realize now that's how I did my homework, by drawing with the students over and over and over. Also carving all these things. Like I'd do a workshop up there and we'd make 17 bent boxes. And then we'd paint them, and some of them would carve them too.
That's a great reference to a major figure in the artistic scene in British Columbia, Frida Diesing. And in fact, the museum just recently acquired an old woman mask by Frida. And as you know, Dempsey, the school that you founded up there in Terrace is also named after Frida Diesing. Next, we're going to move to an eagle's chief's robe. Again, on the subject of the eagle, can you speak to the design of this work?
Yes, I did with my sister, Linda Bob. And I did the cutting, I did the design, I drew out the design and I cut the design, and then we worked together on shapes and how we're gonna do the fringes on this. But what we thought of this one is a cape, like instead of the flat, the black and the red, the applique, the cutouts is traditionally done on the square traditional blanket. But what we did was we wanted to make it different for a chief's robe. So I painted the leather on the top so that the eagles, you could see the eagles on the ends and his wings, they fold down the front of the chief's when he wears it. And the wings will fold around his shoulders like they were holding him. And then I did a little eagle face on the bottom with the tails coming down too. This one of our, well, we did this one and we did a few of these. But I always wanted to change. Like I don't copy things, and copying makes me ill. So I'm always thinking, always innovating. That was our tradition.
That's great. And next we're going to move to a smaller piece and back to a carving and a bronze, these two killer whale forehead masks of 1998.
Yeah, I started in bronze in the early 90s. I started working in bronzes, and I went down to Boise, Idaho, and there was a bronze caster there. And I did a few bronzes there. And then later on, I went to Italy, and I studied there for a month. I worked in the foundry there, and I learned bronze casting. And the bronze is it's really different. And on this piece, like the fin on the left side is low, but the other one is up. What I did was I cut that. When I made the wax, I cut the wax off and I brought the fin up and we welded it back onto the wax and made the bronze. Bronze is really different. I was lucky I got into it.
And the next image, you developed a very close relationship with another major Canadian artist, Joe Fafard. And can you talk about, the process of taking this bear mask rendered in wood and transferring that into bronze, and your relationship with Joe Fafard?
Yeah, I met Joe, and then I talked to him, and he knew about my work, and I knew a bit about him, but I just didn't meet him. And then I found out he had a foundry, and then so I got my friend to phone him, and then I got to meet him, and then we started talking, and then we started working together. But Joe's got one of this bear mask too in bronze. And like people say, why bronze? But our people, like the Tlingit people, we make copper masks, and bronze is almost all copper. And to us, the copper was it was for protection. And so I wanted to see if my work would transfer into bronze. Because what I realize now is that if you know sculpture, if the wood is not strong, the bronze is not going to be strong. So what I did was, you got to know sculpture. So that's why I've been doing I've been at it for 50 years now. I've been studying bronze and learning about as much as I can about art.
And you had an interesting story when we were talking earlier today about the kind of things that Joe Fafard made versus the kind of things that you make. Can you retell that?
Well, you know, Joe and I, we talk about art, and he knew so much, and we talk about culture too. And I used to call him the cow guy, you know, because he made a bunch of cows. And he called me the mask guy because I made a bunch of masks. And anyways, the only difference between Joe and I was his imagery was cows and horses, and pigs, and farm animals, because that was his culture. And mine was eagles and ravens and wolves, because that's my culture. And then I realized that's what culture is. It's what you live and where you live. And, you know, like,
and then,
he was a great sculptor.
And then on the topic of eagles and bears, we have Eagle and the Bear People of 2013. And this is actually in Michael Audain's collection.
Yeah, this piece is quite large. It's yellow cedar too. And I did a little human on the bottom, and he's a bear too, and he's got a little bear on his chest. And it looks like he's falling. He's falling. And that's a little eagle on the top. And the eagle and the bear, they go together. It's one of our stories about this guy taken by the bears. And that's him on the bottom. And on the top is the eagle. And plus there's an eagle in his ears is another eagle head. There's two eagles up there. The eagles and the bears, they go together, and they come from the north.
Excellent. And then before we go on to the question and answer, we have one last piece, and both these last images come from Rachel Topham Photography, and this is wolf, eagle, and human mask. And again, you've made some dramatic changes to the standard mask format, and if you can speak to this piece, which is also rendered in alderwood.
Yeah, this piece, I you know, like, I had this dream one time, and I seen a big mask face, and what was happening was there was faces bubbling. They were just like they were bubbling and changing as they were moving up the face, and they went right over the top and down the back. And in the movement on the mask, I saw how forms should fit on the face to make it real or make it look right. Like, otherwise it looks like you just stuck it on there. And it has to fit, it has to flow, it has to work. You know, like, I realized you could innovate, but you have to make it work. By making it work, I mean, it has to be good. It has to fit, and it has to be in its place. And that's what I realized about these little faces. And then so my pieces started getting more and more intricate, more and more faces. And then it just went crazy after that. But,
And before we go to the Q&A, we're going to just look at a monumental piece. And this is a wolf pole that's at an ancient village just outside of Terrace. And we'll go to the next slide of that. I think I took this photograph in the rain, and that's why it's so dark. Can you speak to this wolf pole and that village and its importance outside of Terrace?
Yeah, it's the village, Kitsalas village. It's a Tsimshian village. And they asked me to do the wolf on there. And so I did this piece, and I added the head, and I hollowed it all out too, otherwise it would crack. But I hollowed out that mouth too, really deep, because I know if it gets wet and it'll crack. And what I did was I really been working on the wolf, trying to make it more sculptural, working on the teeth, getting it deeper. And this piece is a very flat pole, but I wanted to sculpt it right out. And that's what I did with this wolf. It's very deep.
Well, thank you so much, Dempsey. And we're just going to go into the question and answer part of the TNT broadcast. And the first question comes from Carolyn in Pemberton. And she asks, how old were you when you started carving, Dempsey?
That's kind of a tricky question because when we were kids, we had no toys, and so we were so poor we had to carve our own toys. And so I was probably 9 or something, 8 or 9, 9 or 10, 9. When I started carving, we just had a little knife and we'd make bow and arrows and we'd make slingshots. We were cannery kids in Port Everett, and there was no internet. There was no television. We drew, and we painted, and we carved. And we'd look in the Simpson Sears catalog. We called it the Wish Book. And we'd see a gun in there, and we'd draw it out, and we'd carve it and paint it all up. And then that's how we made our toys, and that's sort of how I started carving. And then when I went to work with Frida, I got that good feeling again, carving wood, when I was working with Frida. And I knew that's what I want to do. I wanted to carve. That's how I started carving.
And you'd mentioned before when we were talking that, some of your relations kind of inspired you to become a master carver. Can you talk about some of the people in your family that influenced you?
Yes, I'd like to talk about my mother, Flossie Bob, and she used to tell me stories while we're washing dishes, and tell me over and over. And then my grandfather, Johnny Sincoots, Garlic, he was Raven, and he told me stories. And my great aunt, but we called her Grandma Eva Garlic, and she told me stories. And she told me about my great grandfather, who was a carver. I didn't know about him, but she told me about him. And my other grandma was Helen Carlick. She was my grandmother, Julia Carlick's sister. And she was a beater, and she knew a lot of stories. And so these were the people that really supported me and backed me in the beginning, because they knew what I was trying to do, and they knew about the struggle it would take to get there. So that's why I'm very thankful for them, and for Frida too, and my teachers, because I don't know what I would have done if I didn't meet Frida.
Excellent. The next question comes from Gail in Victoria, and she asks about, where you get your wood and the different qualities of wood and what you use it for.
Well, we get it locally. Like I get the alder from here or in Prince Rupert. Prince Rupert's got lots of good alder, straight and clean. And we get the red cedar from down the coast here, down towards Kitimat, and the yellow cedar too, wherever we could. But it's like each wood has its own purpose. The alder is for our masks, our bowls, our spoons, because the alder has no taste. And it's a hardwood. And it's a really beautiful carving wood. And it gives really good, strong detail. And the yellow cedar, we use it for smaller sculptures and also, like small totem poles, because it gives really good detail. It's really crisp and it's harder than red cedar. Red cedar we use for totem poles, for canoes, for masks too. And we use it for larger pieces. Like each wood has its own purpose.
Excellent. And I know that you've got a very long-standing connection to New Zealand, and I believe we have some New Zealanders watching tomorrow there. And Anne and Helen, ask about your connection to New Zealand and the Maori.
Oh, I went there in 2001. It's a long story, but anyways, I was working in Alaska, and one of my relatives up there, her name was Betsy Jackson, and we were renting a room from her. She kept telling me about New Zealand, and you got to go there. She said, they're just like our people. You're going to see. So she said, you got to go there. She said, I went there and I seen it. You got to go. So I said, okay, I'll go. And I knew I always wanted to go there. Then we got invited there in 2001. And since then, I've been there, I think 11 times or maybe 12. But you know what they did for us was they challenged us, and also they made us see our work in a different way. And they have very beautiful work there, very beautiful old carvings. And I love sculpture, and I love art too. And I wanted to work with them because I felt this connection because of our, they're weavers, they're carvers, they're singers, they're dancers, they're canoe people, and they're longhouse people. So I've seen all these similarities, and it's incredible how close we are and how our art is similar but different. And what they did for us was it made me see our art in a different way, because trying to explain it all the time, when you live in your culture, you take things for granted. But when you try to explain it and show people, and then you really understand what your culture, what it means, what culture is. And I realized too that what they did was they kind of twisted it on us, but I think we did that too to them. But just to make us better artists, better people too. And I'm really thankful for some of the elders I met there and stories I learned, and I realized like art is about life. It's about people, it's about culture, it's about good things, and it's universal. And I love their art, I love their sculpture, and I love their songs, and their stories are similar too. And we're just like brothers. We're like brothers. I was just lucky I was there ready, and I was there when I met them,
You got a couple of good things on the couch there beside you, Dempsey, and I was hoping maybe you could show those as examples of what you're working on right now.
I did this piece before Christmas, and then I left it, but it's an eagle. You can see the eagle's beak here. He's transforming. That's his nose. You can see his wings are on his arms and his hands. He's half human. There's a base here, and there's little bears in the front, 2 bears. And then he's holding on to this guy here. And there's a little guy coming out upside down, coming out of the mouth there. And it's a yellow cedar, and it's a sculpture. I've been doing sculptures, like I've got so many ideas. I wanna put them into these forms because it takes too long doing it three-dimensional. So what I've been doing was I've been just developing my ideas. And this all comes from my drawing. I drew every line, then I carve every line. And I actually made two. And this one is the raven, little human. There's a human up here. There's a little frog. There's a little frog here. There's a frog coming out here, and there's a little man in there. He's coming out of the raven's mouth. And that's the cedar bark on the back. Cedar bark rope.
And you were going to show us how you carve it.
I use my bent tools. I don't know if you could see it, but this is my bent knife. I carve around the eyes like that. Our bent tools are, you could cut both ways, like you cut this way, you could cut back. We use a lot of bent knives for finishing. When I started too with Frida, we never used much chisels because we had no money. We had no money to buy them. So we had to make them. So we made our own tools. And Frida taught us how to carve with our traditional tools. And I think that was one of the best things I learned from Frida, was to use the knife proper, and the adze, and to do my homework. Because what I did was Frida sent us up to Alaska to teach. And then by teaching, I learned how to draw. When I started, I didn't want to draw. I just wanted to carve. But what happened was I hit the wall and I couldn't get any better. So I had to go back and learn how to draw. And it was funny because Frida was pretty tricky because she sent us to Alaska. One time I phoned Phil Jensen. He's a great silversmith, goldsmith. And he said, you know what? He said, we taught for nothing in Alaska. I said, what do you mean? We got paid. He said, no. He said, all the pieces we had to give to those museums up there and places where we taught. He said, those pieces are worth now more than we ever got paid for. He said, and he said, but we did it. He said, because Frida said to do it. And then after a while, he said, we did it for the love of Frida, he said. And that's why we did it. And that's
excellent.
That's how I did my homework, through drawing and teaching with the students. Because I realized a true artist, you cannot mature as an artist if you didn't do your homework, which means you got to learn the sculpture, you got to learn drawing, you got to learn design, you got to learn wood, you got to learn tools, you got to learn all that stuff if you're going to get good. And if you stop learning, you stop being an artist. And that's what I know.
Well, thank you so much, Dempsey. And we're going to end quickly just to give people a little taste of a major piece that you're working on now. And can you just a little commentary on this poll that both you and Stan Bevan are working on that is scheduled to go up at the Emily Carr University of Art plus Design?
This pole here, I did the wolves on there, the wolves up top there, and those are the wolf people. And the wolf people came from the north. They migrated south. And then what they did was they brought their art and even towed their poles, their totem poles. And then what I did was I honored the basket weaver on the bottom. And then the top of her is the master carver with his mask. And the cedar bark rope is there. And the two little faces represent our people that came from the north. And the cedar bark rope is our connection to our culture and to our land. And that's what that means. And the face above it is the eagles and wolves that came from the north. And what I did on the other side of this pole, I changed everything. I did a woman, just a woman with the eagle on her. It's
well, thank you, Dempsey.
Okay.
And oh, sorry. And that's where we're going to wind up today. And I want to say, Dempsey, it's been such a pleasure. I think I met you for the first time in 1986. So we've known each other for a long time, and it's a wonderful pleasure to have you on tonight, as well as work towards this major exhibition here in the fall. I also want to thank the entire team here at the Audain Art Museum who have remained strong and optimistic in these difficult times. Similarly, I want to extend my respect and appreciation to Michael Audain and Yoshi Karasawa for their ongoing support, and similarly the guidance and contributions of both the museum's trustees as well as founders. We've got a few shout outs tonight. As always, my dad in Cornwall, my little sister Susie in Canada, Kelly G here in Whistler, Harold in T-Bay, Dale, who supplied all those photographs, as well as Rachel Topham Photography. Also a shout out to Eric Savix, who is a major collector of Dempsey's work and has been really kind in providing us access to his collection. Also, not to be forgotten, Sarah Milroy and Jennifer Withrow from the McMichael that were working on this wonderful exhibition and tour for this year and next. I'd be remiss if I didn't make a shout out to our TNT crew here, our director and producer, Justine Nickel, as well as our quality controller, Nadine Hassan. Next week, we have Attila Richard Lukash from Vancouver. And I just want to say good night to Dempsey Bob, also to Marg, and thank you so much for such an insight on your practice. Good night, Dempsey.
I just want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to my family, and thank you, Pi, and thank you to the Maori people too, and the Audain Museum, and Michael Audain. Thank you. Good luck. Good night.
Good night, Dempsey.